What distinguishes a person who is able to make change in their life compared to someone who really struggles is an understanding of 5 important truths. And in this video, I'm going to share with you these 5 truths that I know will make a massive difference to the quality of your life. Truth number 1, willpower and motivation are finite. Okay, it's really important you understand this. So many people overly rely on motivation and willpower. But actually, we know from the research that motivation and willpower never last. In fact, in the research, it's called the motivation wave. Motivation goes up and motivation goes down. Now, if you're relying on motivation in order to make change in your life, you're going to struggle. It will get you started, but it won't get you finishing or continuing. And that's the key. And so you have to plan for when your motivation and willpower start to go down. The author, James Clear, who wrote the book Atomic Habits, he says something really quite profound in that book. We do not rise to the level of our goals. We fall to the level of our systems. Now, it's really important you understand this. Now, I imagine you are brushing your teeth every day. Right? What's toothbrushing got to do with what we're talking about here? You don't brush your teeth in the morning and the evening every day because of willpower and motivation, do you? No, if it was down to that each day, you probably wouldn't be doing it. The reason you're doing it is because you've set up a system, right? You've set up a system, which means you're going to do it regularly. So what are the components of that system? Well, they're the rules of human behavior change, which I have spoken about on many occasions on my YouTube channel. Okay, number 1, you've made it easy. This is probably one of the most important rules that you need to understand if you want to make changes in your life. If you make your new desired behavior really difficult, as many people do, you will do that behavior when your motivation's high. No problem. You know, and the classic case is in the first 2 weeks of January. People's motivation is sky high, so they do their new difficult behavior. The problem is halfway through January or 3 weeks into January, when our motivation and willpower starts to drop, as it will and as it does for everyone, you'll no longer do that behavior. If it's difficult, you'll only do it if it's easy, right? So let's go back to toothbrushing. If you had to brush your teeth for 20 minutes every day, I suspect you probably wouldn't be doing it regularly. But because it's 2 minutes in the morning and 2 minutes in the evening, it happens. And you can apply that same principle to anything you want to start changing in your life. I've been a doctor for over 2 decades, right? I've seen tens of thousands of patients, and I commonly see patients falling into this trap. They think everything has to be perfect, right? I have to do 20 minutes of meditation each day, or a 1-hour workout every day. I'm not saying don't do those things, but I'm saying if that's what you're saying you have to do before you start making change and taking action, you're probably going to struggle, okay? So rule number 1, you've got to make it easy. And rule number 2 is think about where that behavior is going to go in your day, right? So we know that every single human behavior requires a trigger, right? A trigger to make it happen. And triggers come in a variety of different forms. A trigger could be a memory. Oh, I really want to do that thing. I'm just going to remember to do it. Well, it does work. It just happens to be the most unreliable trigger that exists. From the research, we know that the very best form of trigger is when you stick on that new behavior onto an existing habit, right? So what's a habit? Well, a habit is an automatic behavior that you're doing without any conscious thoughts. So if you've been subscribed to my YouTube channel for a while, you will know probably that I do a 5-minute strength workout in my kitchen every single morning. Why? Because I follow those 2 principles, okay? Number 1, I made it easy. It's a 5-minute workout. I've also made it easy by not having to get changed. I do it in my pajamas, right? I made it easy in other ways, which I'll share with you in just a moment. But principle number 1, I've made it easy. Principle number 2, where do I put it? I put on that workout onto my coffee habit, right? So You may or may not have a coffee habit. I do. It's something I do every morning. About 5:30, I will make myself a pot of coffee, and I like my coffee to brew for 5 minutes. So in those 5 minutes, I do my strength workout. Right? That's why it happens. And I've rarely missed a day in over 5 years now. And I can assure you it has nothing to do with willpower and motivation. Okay, so I really want you to think about this idea. If you want to take action in your life, do not rely on motivation and willpower. Try and apply those two principles to whatever it is: working out, journaling, writing, meditating, doing your breath work, whatever you want in life. Apply those two principles, and I guarantee things will start to change very, very quickly. Lesson number 2. Love and fear cannot coexist. Okay, this is a really important truth for life that once you understand, it will transform your experience of day-to-day life and how you approach obstacles and how you approach change. Right, this is something I think I only really fully understood in the last few years, and I want to share it with you because since I really understood this, it has had such a profound impact on my life, health, happiness, and my relationships. I know it's going to be transformative. So one thing I've learned in my 2 decades of being a doctor is that it's not necessarily the behavior that's the problem, it's the energy behind the behavior. Can we really think about that? Think about the things that you're trying to bring into your life, those desired behaviors. You know, it could be something I've already mentioned in lesson number 1, or maybe something different. Now, were you able to make those behaviors stick in the long term, or did they come in for a few weeks, your desired behaviors, and then fall by the wayside? Now, yes, like I mentioned in lesson 1, we often overly rely on willpower and motivation, but you also want to think about the energy behind that behavior. Let's take alcohol as an example, okay? It's something that many people are trying to reset their relationship with, but we often try and make it black or white, right? Is alcohol good or is alcohol bad? Well, it kind of depends. In the West, let's say here in the UK or in America and Canada, a lot of people are using alcohol to soothe their stress or their loneliness or their isolation. Whereas in these blue zones, these 5 areas around the world where people are living to a ripe old age in really good health, with minimal health problems, right? So they're living to 100 and still able to walk around and be independent. A lot of them are consuming a glass of wine every evening, but they're using it not to soothe stress and isolation and loneliness. They're using it as a way of intentionally bonding with their family and their community and their friends. Now, the impact of that behavior is going to be very different because the energy behind that behavior was very different. Right, so think about your own behaviors and what is the energy that's driving them. So let's think about New Year, because I think we all know what it feels like to try and make changes in January. But this applies, frankly, to any time of the year. Often, the energy behind our behavior is guilt or shame or I'm not good enough. Right? So we're trying to bring in behaviors into our life to overcome how we view ourselves. But those behaviors will never last in the long term. If you're trying to overcome guilt, shame, unworthiness, which many of us have, which I had for many years, those behaviors will not stick in the long term. You will not be able to make change that lasts. I couldn't in the past. I can now. Many of my patients couldn't, because the energy behind that behavior actually came from fear. Right, so this lesson is saying that love and fear cannot coexist at the same time. Let's think about that. What are the downstream emotions and feelings that come from love? Well, they're joy, compassion, empathy, kindness, collaboration, right? Let's think about the downstream emotions that come from fear, guilt, shame, envy. What is the energy behind your behavior? Remember, love and fear cannot coexist at the same time. So I really want you to think about that and reflect on that over the coming days, the coming weeks. And just ask yourself, how many of my behaviors have an undertone of love and compassion behind them? And how many of them are driven by fear? Don't beat yourself up. It's okay if they're all driven by fear. You have to be honest with yourself and acknowledge where you are if you truly are going to make changes going forwards, right? But I want to share a few exercises with you that relate to this lesson. Okay, the first exercise is a gratitude exercise. I'm a huge fan of gratitude. Scientific studies have shown gratitude, a practice of gratitude, can help lower anxiety, lower depression, improve happiness, improve health, make it more likely you're going to stick to your healthy behaviors, helps you with decision making, helps you be more productive. And the remarkable thing about gratitude is that it's free. You just need a system to practice. So relating to the last lesson about motivation and willpower, let me give you something that's really simple. I ask myself 3 questions every single morning. The first question is, what is one thing I deeply appreciate about my life? Okay, it's simple, but it changes how I view the world each morning. A lot of people don't understand this, right? They think that the way they are is the way they have to remain without realizing that most of our daily patterns are just repeated behaviors. You're probably acting today like you were acting yesterday, not necessarily because that's who you are, but because that's who you became at some point in the past and you haven't done anything to start changing that. What we practice, we get good at, right? So if you practice gratitude regularly, you start to see gratitude everywhere. If you wake up, if you go on the news and infuse your brain with negativity, your thoughts, your behaviors, your actions later on are going to be downstream from that negativity and are therefore likely to be negative as well. No matter how challenging we feel our lives might be at the moment, pretty much all of us have at least one thing we can be grateful for. Our healthy body, the food that we're able to put into our mouth, the roof over our heads, perhaps the heating. Even though it's cold outside, we can still afford to heat our house, whatever it might be. And once you start training yourself to look for the gratitude that already exists, you'll start to see it everywhere. It's just a matter of practice. So I really would encourage you to do that. And again, another way I want you to think about this is through the lens of cars. Right now, have you ever experienced this? Maybe you're in the market for a new car and you go and see a red car in the car sales garage one day. You go, yeah, I quite like that. I'm not sure. Let me give it some time to think. And then for the next few days, you see red cars everywhere. Or perhaps another example that relates to this. I've certainly experienced that, and I know many other people have as well. Is it true that there were more red cars, that you just happened to see all of those red cars because there were more in your vicinity in the 2 or 3 days after you saw the red car in the garage? Those red cars were always there. There is so much going on around us all the time that if your brain was to consciously absorb it all in and you be aware of it, you'd be paralyzed. You wouldn't be able to move. That your brain is always filtering. It's filtering what it thinks you need to know to get on with your day, to get on with your life, right? So those red cars were always there, but because you have taught your brain that, you put your focus on this red car that you may want to buy, you start to see it everywhere. It's the same principle with gratitude. It's exactly the same thing. If you do this every day, and again, make it simple, make it easy, stick it onto your morning tea or coffee or whatever works for you, you will start to see gratitude everywhere. And more of your behaviors will come from the energy of love rather than the energy of fear. And if you're skeptical, I would say try it. For 7 days, I challenge you first thing in the morning, ask yourself that question. And if you can, write it down. There's something really powerful about actually writing it down. It forces you to take a pause. Now, there's actually some research saying that actually writing down with pen and paper is probably better than typing it in on the notes app on your smartphone. But again, listen, If I can't convince you to write it down in a journal or a piece of paper, sure, do it in your smartphone. It's still going to have an impact. Now, there's a partner practice with that you can do in the evening. To make sure you're taking action after watching this video, I've created a free guide to help you build healthy habits. We can all make short-term change, but can those changes become a fundamental part of our life? Often they don't. And that's why in this free guide, I share with you the 6 crucial steps you need to take. They're really, really effective. If you want to get hold of that free guide right now, all you have to do is click the link in the description box below. Lying in bed at night, if you have a pen and paper next to your bed or a journal, what are 3 things that went well today? Or what are 3 things I can be grateful for? If 3 feels too much, do 1. But the more you practice, the more able you will be to see the gratitude and the love that actually does exist. Lesson number 3. No piece of advice works for absolutely everyone. And I include the advice I'm giving you in this video in that. It's such a key point. And I think not understanding this key lesson keeps so many people stuck and in procrastination mode, right? No one knows your life better than you do. And I've seen this as a doctor for many, many years. Right? Let's take diet as an example, because I think people kind of get this straight away. Loads of people out there are fighting about what is the best diet? Is it plant-based? Is it low carb? Is it paleo? And the truth is, they can all be the best diet for certain people, but not one of them are probably going to be the best diet for everyone. I have literally seen hundreds of patients thrive on a low carb diet. I've seen hundreds of patients thrive on a more paleo type diet. I've seen hundreds of patients thrive on a whole food plant-based diet. What I've always helped my patients do is help them find what is the right approach for them. And that comes through a process of experimentation. So if you are a subscriber to my YouTube channel, you may have seen many of my podcasts on this channel. And, I can talk one week to, let's say, a well-esteemed researcher, a medical doctor from Harvard, who might say, and I've done this with Dr. Chris Palmer, who will tell us that a ketogenic diet can be transformative for some people with severe mental health problems, like bipolar, for example. And he will present research to support his viewpoint and multiple case studies. And I think Dr. Chris Palmer is a phenomenal doctor and doing incredible things. But then a few weeks later, I could talk to someone else from another esteemed institution who's perhaps saying that there's evidence supporting a whole food plant-based diet for some patients with mental health problems, and will also present me evidence and case studies. And then a few weeks later in my Instagram messages, I'd often get people saying, hey, listen, Dr. Chachi, I really like both of those doctors and what they had to say. And they all had research and they all had powerful case studies. I don't know which expert to trust. But I think that's a wrong question to be asking. In this world now where we are getting bombarded with information and expertise from well-credentialed experts, I think the most important question is not which expert should I trust, it's why do I no longer trust myself? Okay, it's so important that you start to pay attention. So in that example, I would often say, well, hold on a minute. If you like both of those doctors and you resonated with both of their messages, why don't you for 4 weeks try one of their diets? Okay, and as you're following it, pay attention, right? Be present with yourself. Pay attention to your energy, vitality, sleep. What was your gut like? What were your bowels like? What were your relationships like? What was your focus like? How productive were you? Okay, just pay attention. Do that for 4 weeks. And then maybe for another 4 weeks, you follow the other expert's advice. And again, pay attention to those same things. And then you will very quickly realize what is the right approach for you at this point in your life. That's the key. What is the right approach for you at this point in your life? I'm not saying ignore experts. I'm not. I'm saying listen to experts, but put them through your own filter. Only you know what is best for you. There are some principles of a healthy diet for sure. No question. Mostly minimally processed foods and whole foods. Try and reduce the amount of ultra processed foods in your diet. Yes, these are good principles to try and adopt for sure. They will make a massive difference on how quickly you feel full, how much you're craving away from meal times, how much you want to snack. If you're eating mostly whole foods, your body will start to control your appetite and your hunger in quite an effortless way for many people. So it's very important that you try and do that. But then once you've got that as your basic framework, different things actually do work for different people. And it may be that you need an approach now at this time in your life, and maybe that will change in a few years. Right? These are the nuances which we're really not getting online enough. And I think it's keeping people trapped, because if you're following an expert's plan and it's not working for you, you can feel disheartened. You can feel guilty that there's something wrong with you. The expert has all the answers. I'm trying to follow the expert's plan, but I'm the failure. Remember the last lesson. Love and fear cannot coexist. If you're following an expert's plan because you believe that expert knows more than you do, and you fail, you never think the plan is the failure, or people rarely do. They think they're the failure. So then fear and a dislike of oneself is the energy behind their behaviors. Right? So I want to give you confidence. I want to say, no, trust yourself a little bit more, right? Pay attention, listen to all this advice, but go, I'm not sure about that. And again, if you're not sure, you try out these different diets, you go to your doctor, get your blood test done and see, right? Those things are really important, but do trust yourself. Fasting is another prime example of this, right? People say, is fasting good or bad? Well, the two most important questions when considering any piece of health advice is for who and in what context. Fasting is neither good nor bad. It depends on who is using it. Fasting is just a tool. If, for example, you have excess fat on your body, or you're pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic, the right form of fasting, maybe in conjunction with a healthcare professional, can potentially be transformative for you. If, on the other hand, you're underweight and you're suffering with or recovering from an eating disorder, perhaps fasting's not the best thing for you at this moment in time. Okay, it's not black and white. We want to make things black and white, but they're not. And so this lesson is really about empowering you and saying it's okay to listen to experts, but ultimately you are the very best expert for your life. Lesson number 4, health is at the foundation of everything good in your life. Now, you may say I'm a little bit biased, and I probably am a little bit biased because I am a medical doctor. So of course I'm going to be biased towards health. But I really do believe this. Anything good in your life really requires health at its foundation. Because when you're healthy and when you prioritize your health, all kinds of things change in your life. Yes, you've got more energy, which means you're better to be around. You've got more energy to pursue your passions. When you're healthy, you're likely to be happier. We know this from the research. I wrote an entire book on this, the relationship between health and happiness and health. And the research very clearly shows that happier people are healthier, but it goes the other way. Healthier people are happier. And there's a variety of different reasons for that, which will probably be on the scope of this video. But just know that health is important for your happiness, for your relationships. Why for your relationships? Well, if you don't feel good in yourself, if you're tired or you're not prioritizing your health enough, you're not eating the right foods, how present are you? How patient are you with your partner, with your work colleagues, with your children? But the point is that health is important. And as we get older, it becomes even more important, because we often find that the things we could get away with in our teenage years or our 20s, we simply can't get away with in our 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. You have to pay more attention. So what can you do about your health? Well, there are literally hundreds of videos on this YouTube channel on the things that you can do for your health. But I want to provide for you in this video a very simple framework. I call this framework the 4 pillars of health. Okay, these are the most important pillars that not only have an impact on your short-term health and your long-term health, they're also 4 pillars that you have a pretty high degree of control over. So what are they? Food, movement, sleep, and relaxation. Right? Think about those 4 pillars. And the key message for this video is you don't need perfection in any one of those 4 pillars, but you do need balance. And what I've seen with patients over the years, very, very commonly, is that people tend to focus on their favorite pillar. So let's say, for example, you are a foodie and you're really into your diet. I've seen this so many times, right? I've had messages on my Instagram from people about this as well. It's so common. When they think about making a change in their life, let's say with their health, they go to their favorite pillar. But I've seen people whose diet is already 80% pretty good. They've made some great changes. It's 80% whole food based. And instead of focusing on the 5 hours of sleep they're having a night, they're trying to take their diet from 80% good to 85% good. But you're much better off working on your weakest pillar. So my question to you is, out of food, movement, sleep, and relaxation, and that relaxation piece is the whole stress piece, basically, which of those 4 pillars do you need the most work in? We kind of all intuitively know that. You know, you will know for you, actually, you know what, this pillar needs the most work. You're only as good as your weakest link. That's a phrase that we can apply to many different situations in our lives. And you can very much apply it to your health. Let's take sleep, for example. We know that many of us are sleep deprived. We know that many people are chronically stressed. They're staying up way too late. They're exposing themselves to lots of artificial light in the evenings, which is keeping them up even later. But they still have to get up early to go out and work. But if we just take sleep as one pillar, we know that when you are sleep deprived, yes, you have less energy the next day. That's pretty obvious. You're more tired. But it goes far beyond that. You're less empathetic. You're less compassionate. You're less creative. Your focus goes down. You're less able to resist temptation. Right? So when you are sleep deprived, not only do you crave more sugar and caffeine, but even when you're surrounded by it, let's say you're trying to go to the coffee shop and order your Americano, but whilst you're waiting in the queue, you see all the pastries and the croissants and the cakes and whatever it is, you are less able to resist temptation when you're sleep deprived. So not sleeping well has so many knock-on effects on your behaviors the next day. Right? And I can make the same case for movement and stress and nutrition. Right? So there's many videos on this channel about the details of what you can do. But for this video, I want you to really think about which of these 4 pillars do you need the most work in, and pick one thing that you can start doing